I hate ads and you do too. Get an ad blocker to avoid that shit. You can donate to my Ko-Fi or get a membership to support my content so I don't have to worry about copyright. Thank you and enjoy the video.
Simply put, half the stuff I want to do on Linux is pointlessly complex for what it needs to be, or does it? The question is, can you sailing on Linux? Now we really know why the switch to Linux? Just off the thumbnail? Honestly, man, I think the Linux community is delusional, not ours. No, we are the most friendly community ever.
Nice joke.
Can I have $1,000, please?
At the 33-second mark, because we gay digital communists. Fuss is a lot like decentralized communism. Imagine if this happened in modern times though. All the furries and gay arch users storming Microsoft HQ. Funniest shit.
Tux Guevara bringing on the Linux revolution the world needs.
I can practically taste the Reddit.
Bro, rethink your life decisions.
I did. He did and chose happiness. Yep. Ooh. I'm not even gonna try and read that. Thank you very much.
Let's see about happiness, so bro gets sent straight down to hell. Does this a proprietary or something? I ain't doing all that just to switch to another OS. I can't code at all.
Linux 2D.
Hello Learnix's lovely learners, my name is Patrick28, and I'll be Learnix's interrogator for this long-awaited Q&A.
Okay. We got question number 1, which is...
Learnix, what is the one thing you hate most in this world?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I hate hate. But you need hate in order to have love and vice versa. I hate negativity, but you need negativity to drive positivity. So I think what I hate is the uncertainty, the spasmodic factor, and the unpredictability of life. There's a lot of variability and granularity to every facet of life, and it's never going to come down to like 2 decisions. There's always a gray area. And that is the most compelling and captivating part of life, but also probably the most devastating. It's cathartic. It's cathartic regarding everything, and the sooner that you come to terms with it, the sooner that you can just, scratch the bullshit and just enjoy things for what they are, right? Alright, next question.
What was the motivation or first impressions when first hearing about Linux? After all, you used Gentoo, so there's always a reason for this journey.
As a kid, I was always seen as different. I was, I wouldn't say I'm like necessarily intelligent so much as I'm just unique. I'm different. I think weirdly, I've always had my own way of doing things. For example, I actually don't know how to formally or theoretically do basic arithmetic or division or multiplication, like things like that. I don't know how to do that on paper. When people say carry the numbers, when people say distributive property, I don't know what they're talking about. I'm 18 years old, and I don't know what they're talking about because the education system kind of fucked me up. And how that connects to my Linux journey is that when I saw Linux, I was captivated because but the fact that I had the freedom to choose something different, it kind of resonated with me. Because all of my life, I had to go the straight and narrow, and I was kind of forced to adapt and change myself for other people or condition myself to believe that there was something wrong with me, when it's almost like Linux was very, I ran into an epiphany when I used Linux, because I was like, this is like a microcosmic kind of analogy for like how I feel in real life. It was like Linux is different. It provides freedom, but it's difficult. It's a path where you have to figure yourself out while you're using it. And while it might sound a little bit too philosophical or on the nose, for me that's what Linux represented for me, is that I was figuring myself out as I was using Linux, because Linux can be seen as an allegory for the human condition, or like, struggling to find the conclusion, to find the positivity and the impetus in everything that you do. Linux, it really brought that out of me, because if I had Windows, it was almost like I was stagnating and I was just being complacent in whatever happened. It was almost like when I grabbed my system by the horns, it gave me more comfortability in the idea that I could grab life by the horns and, you know, take initiative in my own way. I could carve my own path. That's what Linux allowed me to understand in my own life. And I know it's not going to be that deep for everybody, but that's what I kind of got from it. Question 3.
Actual question. If you could fight absolutely anyone, who would you fight?
I don't mean to rain on anybody's parade, especially the person who asked this question, but fighting's not the answer. It's a last resort, and it's always been a last resort. Your first option should always be to talk. You talk to someone, you talk it out, you think about it, right? Anger and resentment and being toxic and impulsive, those are all temporary states of madness. Those are states where you're not necessarily yourself, where you become a different person. And if you think of it that way, it really helps you filter your own actions rationally and sensibly. Because if I get angry and I just say, oh, that's just me, I just get angry, obviously I'm going to feel like it's okay. And it is okay to be yourself, but when you're angry to the point of compulsion and disorientation in a way, there's like a dissonance between you and actions that you are committing yourself to, then you have to realize that you're not you when you do that. And so that's why fighting is never the first option. It shouldn't be. And you shouldn't get caught in the frenzy of it, because ultimately there's probably always going to be a way to just, you know, figure things out some other way. Because if you've won the fight, you're still getting out of there with bruises, scratches. Worst case scenario is that you're going to be done for. You're going to be in the ER, you're going to be hurt, you're going to be fucked up. The person that I would fight would probably be Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg is a weird specimen because he's built fit, but he looks odd. I mean, the same could be said for Elon Musk. I'd rather fight Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. They're both built really weirdly and interestingly, and I mean, I feel like it would be an interesting bout. So this question 4.
Do you have galaxy gas?
I only use Discord for my server, and I only use YouTube to like find music and like watch some stuff. But other than that, I'm kind of cut off. So then when I heard about this whole Galaxy Gas deal, it was from people around me who had those platforms already on their devices. So I'm not really going to have Galaxy Gas, of course. And I wouldn't, because I've never done drugs. I've never done drugs like, you know, to get high. I've never done drugs recreationally. I actually get paranoid taking over-the-counter medicine even. And I've never had a prescription before. Maybe once, but I can't remember that really. I don't like drugs. I've never done drugs. I've never drank. So you're not going to catch me with Galaxy Gas.
Are beginner-friendly Linux distros generally bloated?
See, this is a difficult question to answer, because you can say that it's the no true Scotsman fallacy, where it's like people shift the goalpost as to whether or not something is considered bloated or whether it's light or it's slim. The thing is, and I'm going to give you a very generic answer here, and that's because this is just a very broad, superfluous topic, and so I can't give you a straight answer on that. But beginner Linux distros, considering that most other people are using Windows, are very light. They're very not bloated. They're very speedy. They're very performant, if that's a word. They work better. Performatively, they work better than Windows. So I wouldn't say they're bloated. If you mean within the context of Linux distributions, I still wouldn't say they're bloated, but if you compare them to something like Gentoo or Arch, of course, or Void, I mean, obviously they're gonna be bloated in every other department, but you know, you're kind of just you're going through the weeds at that point. I don't know, if you're digging through that far to see whether or not something is bloated, then you're not using your computer to do something useful. You're just using it for fun, which is okay. Using it for fun's okay, but you know, there's a very discernible line between using your computer for purely utilitarian and practical purposes and, you know, fucking around with it and, I don't know, trying to like make it some sort of game. So, you know, if something's bloated, you shouldn't really worry about what other people say, because if you're using your computer and it's efficient, good. If you see an issue and you want to capitalize on, you know, fixing it, then you should fix that issue. But it's just, you know, it's all about what you consider bloated. Linux isn't even bloated in the first place compared to Windows, so you're honestly in the clear. Question 6.
What do you think about Signal?
I like the idea of Signal. I haven't researched it much because, like I said, I only use Discord, YouTube, and YouTube and this thing. And this thing isn't gonna have Signal. This just has phone numbers. So I want to like Signal. I want to like end-to-end encryption. I want to like messaging platforms that enable you to obfuscate yourself and protect your identity and your privacy, because that's something that has been dwindling obviously in the last decade exponentially. Now the thing is, I don't think Signal's gonna see wide adoption, because a lot of governmental entities are going to make a correlation between Signal and the anonymity and crimes, CSAM, obviously drugs, right? Maybe even racketeering to a certain degree, things like that. It's going to be more rampant on places like Signal and Telegram, and it's just the fact of the matter. You're going to be seeing a lot more of that, and governmental entities are going to be like, hey, we want to nip this in the bud, so they're going to fuck it up, they're going to shut it down, and they're going to put red tape everywhere, and that's just kind of the sad reality of the world. So for as long as you can use it, and if you have a real reason to use it, or you just want to keep your privacy safely with you, Signal's a good option, and any other private end-to-end messenger, that makes sense. Question 7.
What's your take on the BSDs? What distinct purpose do you think they serve, if any at all, compared to Linux?
I'm not a renaissance man when it comes to operating systems. I've used 4 distributions of Linux my entire life. I started with Mint, then I went to Manjaro, then I went to Void Linux, then I went to Gentoo, and now I've been oscillating continuously on a pendulum between Void and Gentoo. I've never touched BSD. I use Windows sparingly when it comes to purposes that only Windows can really fulfill as of now, unfortunately, like music production. As for BSD, I've heard that it's more uniform than Linux, and it follows the Unix philosophy much more, could I say stringently? I guess you could say stringently. It's a lot stricter in that respect. It's also more secure, I've heard, at least from the get-go, right? You don't have to do SE Linux and all this nonsense just to make it secure. BSD is just fucking ironclad from the start, I've heard. I think a major appeal of BSD is the fact that it is the Linux of Linux, as in it is obscure even to Linux users. It's relatively obscure even in the Linux community. So I think a lot of people are going to jump on that and turn it into the next counterculture Linux, because Linux, obviously a big factor of its appeal is that it's nebulous, right? It's esoteric, it's interesting, it's captivating, there's a lot of it's very mystifying, and I think BSD carries that same sentiment, and a lot of people are probably going to jump the gun on it purely just because of that. Other than that, I don't know a lot about BSD, so I'll have to get more experience with it.
What is the best beginner distro, and why is it Gentoo?
This is going to be such a non-answer, but the best beginner distro is the one that you can kind of use the most efficiently. And it sounds stupid, but here's the thing. There are people who started with Arch and they're chugging along just nicely. There are people who've started with Fedora. There's people who've started with, I've heard Nobara. I've heard people start with OpenSUSE, or however you say it. Linux Mint, of course, the obvious answer. Or Ubuntu, God forbid, snap packages. And, I mean, honestly, here's the thing. Linux, there's a lot of parts of Linux that are fragmented and, that are split up, and there's so much variation and choice in the matter. But a lot of parts of Linux are very unified, and that makes it so that whatever distro you pick up, you're not really going to have a crazy different experience if you're not going for a crazy meta distro like Gentoo, or you're not going for something like very minimalist like Arch. Other than that, most other distributions are not going to be pick up and play, mind you, but they're not going to be completely dissimilar to the point where you can't just learn a bit and then, make your own path through it. So the point is that you should be prepared to learn, and don't expect any distro to serve your purposes right out the box, because, your first distro could very well be a slam deal, or it could be like you're 10 distros in, hopping, and you haven't found your groove yet. So, take every take distributions with a grain of salt. They're different enough, but they're not too different. Question 9.
1. What motivated you to get into making the channel? 2. What do you think about the current state of the Linux desktop? 3. Do you think that the terminal is really too scary, or is it just fear-mongering? 4. What usually do you do when you see someone arguing saying that Linux sucks? Most of the times it's just baiting, but I've seen people taking it actually seriously sometimes. 5. Linux TV OnlyFans leak when?
Now this is actually 4 questions in a row, and I'll let you slide with that. I'll answer all of them. What motivated me into making the channel? I created this channel, I believe I made my first video, I want to say 1 or 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. And now here's the thing, I get into ruts very easily. My life, constantly I'm on a pendulum. It's like a sine wave of just like, you know, depression, and then up, I'm like feeling great, depression, up, I'm feeling great, and over again. It's a vicious cycle. And in one of my up and ups, I was on a ramp, and I was like, I want to just create something. I want something to be wholly me. I want to have a passion project. And that was the key word, passion project. It was something that I wanted to feel good about. Now, there are probably little to no people who've seen this, but before I made that first Linux TV video, I actually had created a video prior that was about, if you've ever seen Dawood tech reviews or Dawood computers, whatever it's called, right? If you ever seen Dawood does tech stuff, you ever seen MJR, I was doing something to the tune of those guys, where I would take computers or unique kooky pieces of technology and I would fuck around with them and usually put Linux on them. I did one video like that, and I thought I put my heart into it, but I was like, I'm not really feeling this. I wasn't doing good. I actually had myself on camera the first video, and I was like, this isn't clicking for me. And then I realized, I was like, I'm so impassioned about Linux, and I want to vocalize that. And also, I love learning about Linux. It's when you're passionate about something, you don't mind learning as much as you can about it, because it's so fun. It's fun every step of the way, and even if it's work, it's fun work. So then I was like, I want to research and I want to make a video. And honestly, the video, I'm not proud of it. It's my most popular video on the channel, and I'm not even that proud of it, because I think it is a legitimate blessing that I was graced by the algorithm, and that video spiked immediately. It spiked after a few days. The first morning I woke up and saw that video had exploded, I literally couldn't believe it. And it was like, it's just when you derealize and you're like disconnected from the moment, where you look through your life and it's like life through a TV. I looked and I was like this can't be real in a way. It felt dreamy. But to summarize, what motivated me was pure passion. And it might sound cliche, but that's what motivates anything that you do in your life for a sustained amount of time. If you really want to put your heart behind it, you have to have passion behind it. That's just how it goes. That's what breeds consistency and discipline, of course. The Linux desktop is a it's a tough bitch to cover, because here's the thing. There are some parts where it's like KDE and GNOME, where it's like they're doing good stuff, but then you could easily, scrutinize many portions of those specific, desktop environments, for example, where it's like, there's someone in my server, and he's actually a Tux of War. He's a monthly supporter. I'm looking at you, Trist, and he was like, XFCE, I would say XFCE is minimalist, it's modular. That's what a lot of people would say. But then he's like, no, it lacks basic functionality that would be customary. Not even customary, it lacks basic functionality that would be essential, non-negotiable for a desktop environment. And he's like, the same as with GNOME, the prime example being the controversial lack of tray icons. The distinct lack of tray icons, that was what really had people pull the plug on GNOME in terms of like, this is complete. But then it brings into question, what makes a complete desktop? What do you need and what can you shave off? And the state of the Linux desktop, honestly, I think it's great. I've never seen it more efficient than this. There's loads of customization. There's enough GUI to go around where you could be clicking buttons all day, and you usually wouldn't have to lift a finger to install most applications. Maybe making a few tweaks, you're gonna have to use the terminal, maybe doing a few specific things. Yeah, you might have some intervention there, but for the most part, GUI's gone a long way. Desktops look great. They feel great, right? HDR is coming soon. Everything is kind of just, it's falling into place. The desktop isn't the issue though. It was always software compatibility and the fragmentation aspect of Linux, where multiple projects are being, you know, surveilled in many different ways. I think the desktop aspect is doing great though on its own. Terminal is very interesting to talk about because I talked about it in this video. And basically the terminal, the whole deal is that at first there's a huge kind of hurdle that you have to jump in order to understand how to use it, because it's like, oh, this is nebulous and weird and archaic and antiquated. Like, I have to research in order to find the commands that I want to use. Like, this blows, right? This is fucking bunk. That's the first impression. And then as you go on, you realize the terminal is probably the simplest thing ever, because here's the thing, and I did illustrate that in my my video about it, but the terminal has a very discernible curve where at first it's difficult and it's grueling because you're not used to typing commands, and most people aren't really quick at typing anyways, and they wouldn't, people who grew up with Windows, they wouldn't think that typing out commands would, you know, that's what operating their system hinges on. And it doesn't nowadays. There's so many GUI menus in Linux covering like the simple stuff and most basic, you know, operating system functionality. But I think a huge part of it is fear mongering, because people are afraid to use the terminal purely from a standpoint of it's different. I feel like a lot of people don't even want to try it because they assume that all of Linux is the terminal, when that's just, it's unequivocally untrue. It's just false. All of Linux isn't the terminal. I chose to use Gentoo. I chose to use Void. Those are more complicated distributions, right? And the terminal, it's going to have its place. But as for distributions like linuxmint, you're not really going to be hinging a lot of use on the terminal. And so, like I said, once you reach that point where it's like you've passed the first hurdle of getting to know it, and once you memorize a few commands, those commands are usually all you need to operate your system as usual and just have things smooth sailing. And if you need something specific, you can look at a tutorial and copy and paste like terminal commands verbatim. Using the terminal on its own for daily tasks is honestly not difficult, and I would suggest anyone who is afraid of the terminal to try and memorize a few commands and use them every day and just see how painless it is. And the terminal is absolutely amazing for complicated tasks as well, because for things like manipulating a bunch of files, the terminal is just the best, no doubt. When you're using a GUI to do a bunch of complicated tasks, it gets difficult because sifting through, you know, swaths of menus and clicking buttons all around, it's annoying and it's difficult, and memorizing the process, it's tedious because it's just pure muscle memory. When you know those commands though, and you know how to use them, you can use those commands anywhere in any situation, and they never lose their luster because they're multi-purpose. Commands are amazing for that reason. That's my thoughts on the terminal. I'm going to give a very real answer here, and this is me being as legitimate and as sincere as possible. I hope that people can understand the versatility and usability and the freedom and customization and the robust and stable nature of Linux. But if they don't, you can lead a horse to water, but you really can't make it swim. People who don't use Linux, sometimes they're just going to stay like that. Introduce it to them, show them, and, you know, give some talking points. And if they're not convinced, you can't convince them any more than that. Even if the advantages are staring them right in the face, if you know, they have their reservations and they're going to be like, you have to code to do everything and it's different, and I have to install it from USB and I don't want to have to get an ISO and, you know, like find my UEFI fucking settings and all that. If they have that blockage in their head where they don't really even want to, you know, engage, then don't waste your breath. It's just, there are some people who are open, there's some people who are not. And if someone isn't open to the idea, then all you can do is give them talking points and hope that they can sleep on it and reconsider the next day. And if they don't, then there's no point in forcing them, because even if you did force them, and even if they did begin to use it after you forced them, they're going to go back to Windows anyways. So it's just inevitably it won't make much sense. Now, there are times where you can get someone to use it and they'll actually be like, oh, I was all wrong about this. There are times like that, but it's up to your discretion, and you have to use you have to use good rationale as to whether or not you're going to be facing one of those times, because if someone is clearly against the idea and you force them, they're just going to resent you for it. So if someone says Linux sucks, then they're usually, you know, very set in their ways. I'm not making an OnlyFans. And for people who've asked before, this isn't a question. I'm not wearing a maid costume because I'm just not doing that. I don't want to. I don't see any interest in it. I think maid costumes and OnlyFans and the perversion of the internet and, you know, the way that our language has devolved to the point where we're introducing young adults and children to these perverted terms and the fetishization of everything. And the internet has become a cesspool full of people constantly trying to, you know, get brownie points off of saying the most shocking and disgusting and perverted thing. And it's being normalized. And now you have people, you know, intermixed saying all of these things to each other without even realizing the ramifications or, you know, the implications. And, you know, I can't get down with that. And honestly, I think the maid costume deal and OnlyFans and things related in that regard, I can't get down with it. It's sad to me. There's a tinge of pathetic to it. There's a tinge of depressing to it, melancholic. There's a tinge of dystopian to it. I think it doesn't bode well for the future if right now this is what our modern verbiage is comprised of.
Linux, what distro do you prefer to use as your daily driver?
I oscillate between Void Linux and Gentoo. Void Linux is like Arch but less enshittified because I just don't like using systemd. I'm not going to push it on anybody else though. And also, Void's just fun to use. I like it. I like the source repository. I like XBPS. It's very speedy. I like the name. I like the way it functions. I like how fast Void is. I like how few packages it comes with from the beginning. I like that it comes with XFCE from the jump because I like XFCE. Void is just a good time for me. And then, as for Gentoo, it's very robust, it's very customizable, it's very quick when you know how to configure it. Configuring your kernel is a field day, and it's a fun time when you know what you're doing and you're dedicated and you're willing to see it through. A lot of Gentoo is that if you're willing to see it through, it pays off because it's just damn fun to do it. Now, if you don't have the time commitment or the hardware kind of specifications that you're comfortable with tackling Gentoo, then you don't have to. But, you know, it's not really... Gentoo isn't non-negotiable for me on my system because I don't swear myself to my computer like that. I think that would be kind of funny. But those are the two that I use.
Will you ever daily drive Windows ever again?
A couple months ago, not a couple, maybe like a half a year ago, where I did daily drive Windows on accident. But I kind of went back to Linux and I just stuck with it ever since. Windows is like something that I have to use because of music production, and that's a field that Linux is pretty weak in right now, especially in the VST department. But other than that, Windows has ran slow for me. It's crashed. It's, you know, broken for no reason. It's been deficient in ways that are not traceable, in ways that are not, you know, like diagnosable like Linux is. So then Windows becomes, it's just such an annoying thing to trudge through because you never really feel like you're getting better at using Windows. You could use Windows for like 3 years and you'll never feel like you're any better at using it. If you use Linux for 3 years, you're like a master. You feel fucking amazing. With Windows, it's just not the same deal, and I feel like if I went back, I would just be stagnant again. And I also love Linux, and I think it's just better. So, no, I'm not going to daily drive Windows.
How did we start watching you?
I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, it was just a stroke of luck by the algorithm that my first video just kind of blew up. I mean, in 3 months, I've accrued 4.4 thousand subs, I think, or 4.3, I'm not sure. In 3 months, I have gathered what it takes most other people on YouTube years to get. And I have a loyal, dedicated fan base that they do things for me, and it's like, it's just such a weird, it's a weird thing to think about being put on a pedestal. I'm not used to it. I don't want to be used to it, because if I get used to it, then I'm going to become conceited, and I don't want to lose my modesty. I'm still just a person. I'm still just a man, and that's all I am, and that's all I ever will be. And, you know, I'm not a deity. I'm not God. So, you know, if you like my shit, you like my shit. If you don't, that's okay. Just, at the end of the day, we're all people, and we're all doing what we gotta do. I like making content. Maybe you like doing something else. If you watch it, please, thank you. You know, I gotta make a living somehow, and if I'm able to make a living off of this, that would be great. And if I'm able to do it without losing my sense of self and my sense of modesty and humility, then even better.
What's your setup?
This is a microphone. It's like an ATR 1000X or something. It's like an Audio-Technica microphone. It's like it was $100 when I bought it. I've been using it for about 2-3 years, maybe even 4. I have a Razer Lancehead mouse. I use some HyperX keyboard. It's like a 65% keyboard or something. I think it's called I actually don't know what it's called. I use Roland monitor speakers, 90s. I use Roland micro monitors from the 90s. It's called the MAB. This shit is straight from the, like, it's old. And then I have an RX 6600. I have a Ryzen 7 5700X and an RX 6600X T. And I have a 1440p 165 hertz monitor, and then on the right here, I have a monitor that's like 75 hertz, like 1080p, whatever. I mean, and then I have 32 gigabytes of like RAM that's running like 3600 megahertz or something. I don't know. I built it myself. I've been messing around with this computer for like 4 years. I built it in 2020 and it's still chugging, and I've modified so many parts. But the thing is, I don't care about my computer anymore. And not like I don't clean it and like I don't care. I'm saying I don't care as in I don't care about buying parts. I don't care about upgrading it. I just see diminishing returns in it, and I'm not jazzed about it to the point of being a fanatic, so I just don't see a point really.
Do you think distro elitism is true and right? Example, Archer Gentoo user bullying linuxmint user just because their distro is...
I think distro elitism is less of a choice or some sort of like preventable thing, and it's just a byproduct. I feel like it's a byproduct of anything. People are going to be called posers when they're a fledgling in any regard, in any activity. For instance, I'm a fledgling in skating. I'm not good at skating. I fall off every 10 seconds. I'm barely learning how to ollie, how to do the caveman, how to tic-tac, how to even ride, how to balance on the board. Those things I'm still a fledgling in. But the thing is, I'm not a poser because I'm dedicating myself to it. I'm trying to get better. A poser is someone who does it just to, dip their toes in the water and then get out. Or there's someone who's doing it for the flair of it, for the look of it, just to be perceived a certain way. And I feel as though that is how distro elitism sprouts, is that they feel that these people are using it for illegitimate reasons. Now, your operating system is what you use to run your computer, to do things on your computer. If Linux Mint, Fedora, Pop! OS, OpenSUSE, whatever of these non-complicated distros, if any of these are serviceable for you, then you're using your computer aptly and with tact in mind. You're using it with a utilitarian mindset.